Hey guys, welcome back to Gov with Gabby. My name is Gabby Zanis, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more about the required AP Gov Supreme Court case, U.S. versus Lopez. Let's get right into it. So what happened? In 1992, a 12th grader, Alfonso Lopez, carried a gun and ammunition into his high school in Texas. The administrators were tipped about it and told about it beforehand, so then they arrested him. Initially, he was charged under state law, saying that you're not allowed to bring firearms into school zones. But then the prosecutors dropped these charges and they charged him under federal law. Lopez was charged under the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990. The what? The Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1990, which made it illegal for, quote, any individual knowingly to possess a firearm in a school zone, end quote. Lopez was sentenced to all these months in prison with probation, so he appeals to the U.S. Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals actually agrees with Lopez. That's when the case goes all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States. The U.S. government then appeals to the Supreme Court, and the U.S. government argues that guns in schools, they increase violent crime, which impacts the national economy. Crime is expensive, insurance spreads the cost of crime throughout the nation, businesses want to move to an area of crime. It was pretty much an issue that they were trying to argue of the Commerce Clause. So the big question, does the federal government have the authority to regulate firearms through the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990 within the states under the Commerce Clause? So they try to make it a Commerce Clause issue. So what does the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court says no, that the Commerce Clause does not give Congress the power to regulate the carrying of handguns within states, and that the Gun-Free School Zone Act is in fact unconstitutional, therefore siding with Lopez, and that the Supreme Court upholds the decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals. So, why did the Supreme Court make this decision? Well, they thought that if this was ruled commerce, then everything would be ruled commerce, and it wasn't giving any power to the states. It was upholding the 10th Amendment, which gave all power not stated in the Constitution to the states. Lopez's actions were criminal. He did bring a firearm into a school zone, but under state law, his charges could have been upheld. He could have been prosecuted, but the prosecutors got a little bit greedy and they tried to charge him under federal law, when the Supreme Court said no, that's too much, because they tried to make it a Commerce Clause issue, which just was not relevant. Because if they would have said this is a Commerce Clause issue, then everything could have been commerce. And that would have significantly decreased the power of the states and increased the power of the federal government proportionally, which doesn't agree with the balance of power under a federalist system. The Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990 was unconstitutional because Congress lacked the power to regulate the carrying of handguns within states under the Commerce Clause. Prior to this case, a lot of cases had been expanding the power of the national government. This case reverses the trend. This case expands the power of the states in contrast to the previous expanding power of the federal government. The case reaffirms the police powers under the 10th Amendment, and the overall trend in the late 20th century was for the court to side with the federal government. But since the ruling in Lopez's decision, the Supreme Court has been less consistent. So there's not really a trend either way. It's just less consistency versus state and versus federal power. U.S. versus Lopez is very significant and important because it marks the beginning of the limit of the power under the Commerce Clause. So, we just learned a lot. Let's do a really quick overview to make sure we got all the facts. So what happens? Alfonso Lopez, he brings a gun and ammunition into school. The teachers were tipped off, so they get him, arrest him, and he was prosecuted under state law. They got a little greedy. They prosecuted him under federal law. Lopez appealed. Court of Appeals said, okay, wait, Gun-Free School Zone Act is in fact unconstitutional. Then it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sided with Lopez because the prosecutors tried to make it an issue of commerce because they said that all this kind of stuff about how it would make more crime and people wouldn't want an area of crime, less businesses, less money, and they tried to make it a Commerce Clause issue. Didn't really, it was kind of a stretch, didn't work. The Supreme Court sided with Lopez saying, okay, it wasn't an issue of commerce, and the Gun-Free School Zone Act is in fact unconstitutional. This is important because it marks the beginning of a limit of the Congress's power under the Commerce Clause. In the previous cases, a lot of the decisions have been in favor of the federal government, expanding their power under the Commerce Clause. But this case was a very important occasion where it reversed the trend and gave more power to the states, upholding the 10th Amendment. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you learned a little bit, want to get a 5 on your AP exam, or you just love AP Gov, make sure to subscribe, like, comment down below, and turn on your notifications to watch more of the required court cases or following information. Thank you guys. Bye!